Hi! Okay. Alright. I don't know if this is actually going to work, so. It's going to be 7.1. I'm going to try and go over it in like 5 minutes, because it's pretty simple. Alright. All life has two forms of reproducing. All life, not rocks. There's asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. Let's start with asexual reproduction. Alright, so who are your culprits? Okay, pretty much every life form on this planet has some form of asexual reproduction going on inside them, or maybe that is their form of reproduction. But like inside us, there is asexual reproduction going on, even though human beings reproduce sexually, okay? So asexual reproduction happens to all living things, eukaryotic and prokaryotic, okay? How does it go? How do we go about asexual reproduction? Well, there's technically 3 ways. There's budding, which I don't think you need to know about. There's binary fission, and then there's mitosis, which we'll get into later, and binary fission, actually. Alright, so asexual reproduction is essentially cloning. It's genetic cloning, okay? It's easier, it's way faster than mitosis, or way faster than meiosis and sexual reproduction, and you know that. You think about it, it takes 9 months for a baby, it takes 30 minutes for a cell, okay? So it's a lot quicker. The pitfall of it, though, is that it lacks genetic variance, okay? And why is that? Because it is a genetic clone. We are essentially replicating the DNA, cut, copy, paste, and that is your new cell. Start with mom, cut, copy, paste, end up with daughter. Okay? They're exactly the same. Kind of like you and mom. I'm just kidding. But anyway, so that's the pitfall of asexual reproduction, is that it is a genetic clone. If there is a variation, it's a very, very subtle and very small variation, and that happens via some environmental factor or via some like like a fault in the DNA replication, which happens. It does happen, but most of the time when there is a fault in DNA replication, it's usually null. It doesn't even affect the rest of the cell, but sometimes you get the defect that creates that genetic variation that actually makes a difference. This is what leads to the idea of like evolution, these small genetic variances throughout time that lead to a slightly different or maybe vastly different organism way down the line. Okay, that's by simple errors in DNA replication or environmental factors. But other than that, asexual reproduction is like the same. So you can find like a bacterium from millions and millions of years ago, and it should be pretty much the same bacteria as it was millions and millions of years ago. Okay? Sexual reproduction. For sexual reproduction to happen, you need gametes. Okay? Those are your sex cells. And these gametes are always produced via meiosis or meiosis, whatever you call it, okay? The best thing about sexual reproduction is that it presents great variability, okay? This is what makes you unique and me unique, and why someone gets sick to some flu bug and some of us are resilient to a flu bug. This is good, because if we were all clones of each other and some terrible disease wiped through the nation, we would all die, because we all are genetically the same. But because we are sexually reproductive and not asexually reproductive, we have those genetic variances to keep us, relatively healthy or safe from things like disease. Okay, that's why like mutts, dogs that are mutts are better than like purebreds, because you're mixing up the gene pool and that's healthier. Okay, I'm getting off the topic. Anyway, some terms you need to know. Chromosomes are actually just supercoiled DNA. The DNA is so tightly wound it actually looks like that little sausage. That's it. It's a combination of these things called histones and DNA wound around those histones to be really, really tightly coiled. Yes, that is what DNA is. Each chromosome contains one strand of DNA. Okay? Alright. Getting somewhere. Alright, somatic cells. Somatic cells are the cells that are not specialized for reproduction, okay? Somatic cells are diploid. Okay, so what does diploid mean? Diploid means that there are two sets of chromosomes. Well, why would you need two sets of chromosomes? Well, that's a good question. So, two sets of chromosomes come from, one set comes from mom and one set comes from dad. This is what gives us our genetic variability. One set from mom and one set from dad. Now, if we only had one set from mom, then we would be a clone. Does that make sense? Okay? So, we got two sets of chromosomes. This is way off camera. Two sets of chromosomes, one set from mom, one set from dad, and we are denoting diploid cells as 2N. N being the number of chromosomes, and because it's diploid, di meaning two, it is 2N, two sets of, and I'm going to abbreviate chromosome with chromes, or chrome, okay? Germ cells, or gametes, are haploid. They are always made via meiosis, okay? Diploid cells, we won't go into that, okay? Haploid cells are always made via meiosis for reproduction, okay? These are the cells that make the magic happen, alright? Haploid meaning one set of chromosomes. One set of chromosomes, that means like one, I mean, that's it, one set of chromosomes. Let me give you a good example of why. Fertilization. Alright, so fertilization is the process of when two haploid cells come together. Does this make sense? I don't know. You got our sperm and our egg, which are both haploid in chromosome number. And when they come together, they create a zygote, which is diploid. Alright, so fertilization is haploid plus haploid equals diploid. Alright, gamete plus gamete equals zygote. That is what fertilization is, and always will be. Okay? There are not a lot of alwayses in biology, but like fertilization is always going to be haploid plus haploid equals diploid. 1 plus 1 equals 2. Alright? Oh, and also, one thing to keep in mind, if sexual reproduction occurs, meiosis is somewhere in that life cycle, always. Alright? Now there are different ways of going about the sexual reproduction, which we'll go over next. But that's the bare essentials for now.